If you're into Western horror movies like Friday the 13th, Poltergeist, or The Evil Dead, you're gonna love the Splatterhouse Sega Genesis or TurboGrafx-16 games. There were 3 games released in the trilogy. There's also a Famicom game, Splatterhouse Wanpaku Graffiti, that's only in Japan. It's a bit of a spin-off off of the main series, but let me know if you want me to cover it in an upcoming video. We'll start off with Splatterhouse on the PC Engine or TurboGrafx-16. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up that you can only move from left to right. Along the way, you'll get to pick up all kinds of really neat weapons like a 2x4 and smash an enemy into the wall, splattering their guts all over. There's also spears you can throw. Oh, and check out this badass shotgun that you can fire away at enemies. Cleavers, I mean, the list goes on and on. The weapons make convincing sounds when you connect, and the music fits the bill quite well. Everything screams horror here. The story sends out Rick and his girlfriend Jennifer into a mansion to investigate some paranormal activity. Rick is found knocked out, transformed by a cursed mask, and Jennifer is missing. Rick then heads out into the Splatterhouse with his newfound strength. The controls are extremely simple. One button punches or uses your weapon. The other is to jump. You can also do the slide by jumping and pressing the diagonal button and punch, which does more damage to enemies than the standard punch. The enemy designs are fantastic. You got all kinds of horror type enemies like possessed chairs or zombies. There's even a part where you're fighting off clones of Rick in a house of glass. I like that most of the enemies have set patterns, which makes Splatterhouse a good choice if you're looking to complete it in one credit. There are certain branching paths, like here where you have to fall into a hole or climb down a ladder. This gives you a bit more replay value to figure out which is the easier path forward. The bosses were extremely unique. My favorite was this one where you're taking out a chainsaw freak with a shotgun. The second stage boss, you can clearly see the reference to Poltergeist, and that was nice to see. Splatterhouse isn't a very long game. There's just 7 short stages that can be finished in and around 20 minutes or so. Overall, I really enjoy playing through Splatterhouse on my PC Engine from time to time. It's a solid beat 'em up that really fits the horror theme. Next on the list is Splatterhouse 2, and well, it's more or less the same as the PC Engine game, moving from left to right and splatting enemies across the screen with a 2x4. There aren't any new moves that Rick can perform either, which was a shame since it was released on a much more powerful console than the Sega Genesis. Splatterhouse 2 is far more gruesome than the original game. It's like Namco took the original and amplified the disgusting enemies you'll be facing off against. The game is slightly longer than the first one once you get good at it. It comes in at around an hour or so. Keep in mind, the gameplay is much harder than the first one. Man, this game is tough. There is a password system, thankfully. Overall, the stages and bosses are just really tough in Splatterhouse 2, especially later on. It often feels unfair, and you really need to learn the patterns of all of the enemies. The story takes place 3 months after the first game. Rick is still guilty from not being able to save Jennifer and has nightmares of her and the mask. The mask then reappears to Rick and tells him that he has to go back to the house to save Jennifer, and the mask will give him the power to do so. Yeah, this was a bit odd having the mask speak to Rick and all, but hey, it's a horror game and tons of this stuff happens in the movies. The graphics are unquestionably superior compared to the first release. Everything from the colors, to the parallax scrolling, to the more detail in Rick, as well as the enemies and bosses. Splatterhouse 2 is more of the same as the first release and is a good entry on the Genesis. Splatterhouse 3 went in a bit of a different direction. You can now move up and down like in a traditional beat 'em up, similar to Streets of Rage or Golden Axe. It would have been nice to see Splatterhouse finally appear as a co-op game, but sadly it's still only Rick that you can play as. The mask that used to resemble Jason Voorhees has now evolved into a skull. Rick now has more moves. He can throw enemies or grab and headbutt them to death. Something never seen before in a Splatterhouse game is Rick's power meter that he can use to mutate himself into a Hulk-like beast. When you finish off a room full of enemies, the doors will open up. You can pull up a map at that point by pressing start. I found that I would count the least amount of rooms to make it to the boss room marked by the X. Splatterhouse 3 is not much of a scary game, but it is extremely bloody and gruesome. The graphics are great, and the music is definitely a step up from the previous games. You can really feel the power of Rick when smashing up guys or throwing them across the screen. There are weapons still in Splatterhouse 3 depending on which path you choose, but anytime I got hit by an enemy, they would just get taken away. I thought that was really slanted from a gameplay standpoint. The bosses are really difficult, and you'll have to finish off the stages in a certain amount of time in order to get the quote-unquote good ending, which there are 4 endings in total, including the bad ending. Rick now has a son named David who's abducted, while Rick is now the successful Wolf of Wall Street and is trying to put the mask and everything behind him, only to be sucked back in by the mask. Some of the later enemies were just way too difficult. I mean, come on, taking away half my health in one hit is a bit too much. I would say that Splatterhouse 3 is the most polished, and the designers really hit it out of the park with Splatterhouse 3. So if I had to rank the Splatterhouse games from best to worst, I would say that Splatterhouse 3 takes the cake for best horror game in the series, then the original Splatterhouse on the TurboGrafx-16, and finally Splatterhouse 2. Don't get me wrong, all 3 are worth playing today. I just wouldn't put them over better beat-em-ups like Streets of Rage or Hyperstone Heist. If you're a fan of horror movies or are looking for a good game to play on Halloween, you can't go wrong with any of the Splatterhouse games. I'm the RetroKingPin, thanks for watching.